This is a short presentation about taking the mystery out of RGB workflows. The points I'll be covering are: what is RGB? Why do you need an RGB workflow? And what does this mean to you personally? Followed by any questions. So what is RGB? Well, RGB stands for red, green and blue, as you can see in the top left hand corner there. And it's a colour space. It's a colour space that's used to display images in electronic devices such as the ones you can see below. Digital cameras, monitors, iPads, etc. And that colour space is just part of the visible colour gamut that is visible to the human eye. And there you'll see the RGB gamut being shown there. And it makes up about 70% of that gamut. But it's not the only colour gamut that is available. There's also another one that most people will be familiar with, CMYK, and this is predominantly used for magazine printing and book printing and on printing presses. So that's what RGB is. So the next question is, why do you need an RGB workflow? In short, start big, stay big. If we take a look at the current workflow being used, and we see there that an image has been taken on a digital camera in RGB, and the large colour spaces on the left hand side there. This image at the moment gets passed on to the pre-media team in RGB, and if you keep your eye on the bottom left hand corner at the colour space, you see what happens. The first thing they do is convert it to CMYK, because that's the output that they're going to be using it for. And they retouch it in CMYK, and then they send it to the proofing department and they run proofs. And then ultimately those proofs, once approved, along with the files, are sent off to the printer, which is all fine. The problem arises when this next part happens. That CMYK retouched image that's colour correct for the output for the printer is also the same image that gets stored on the media bank for future use. And when in 6 months' time that same image in CMYK is used on a digital solution, it's not maximising the colour space that's available. It's using the tiny colour space of CMYK, which is perfect for print, but is not the correct and is not utilising all of the colour gamut that's available on a digital device. So that's where you are today. So now let's look where we're going to be going in the future now. There's a new RGB workflow. So the first thing you see that you can notice there is that VIP drops into the middle of it. VIP is the virtual in-house production tool that sits at the centre of everything we do. So again, as before, an RGB image is taken on a digital camera, large colour space. A profile is attached to that same RGB image. That profiles it to a set colour gamut. That RGB is passed on to the pre-media team. They apply a CMYK screen profile on there now, so they're not actually converting the image to simulate what it will look like when it's printed in CMYK. And then they remove that once they've done all their colour correction and they're happy with it, leaving the image profiled in RGB. And they pass that through VIP. It's at this stage, just as the file is about to be output to PDF, that it gets converted to CMYK to the smaller colour space. And then just as before, the CMYK image is the one that goes onto the proofer with the profile. The proofer also has a profile attached, so we're getting very good colour control now. And ultimately it goes onto the printer just as before, now with a real strict colour profile attached again, so we should have some real good standards across the colour. Now, unlike the last workflow I demonstrated, we now go back to here. The file that is in VIP stored is the large colour space RGB image with the big colour gamut, and that is the file that this time gets stored onto MediaBank. And just the same as before, when it gets repurposed in 6 months, this time you have a bright, punchy, wide colour gamut being used on these digital solutions such as the iPad or the web or monitors, etc. So we have the correct colour space for the correct medium. So what does this mean to you? Well, most importantly, this RGB workflow is nothing to be scared of. The way we've built it is very simple, and you really shouldn't fear this new way of working. And you shouldn't fear it because there's no changes to many of the things you do today. You don't have to change the way you mark up your images. When you're sending them to the pre-media team, as you did before, if you always wrote plus cyan or minus magenta or plus black, you still write exactly the same. The team in our pre-media office will handle that, that's fine. And there's no change to the approval cycle. You will still receive the proofs, be it on screen or a soft proof or a hard proof, and you mark those up exactly the same as you did. Minus cyan, plus magenta, etc., etc. And hopefully there'll be a bit of time saving. You won't have to convert the images from CMYK to RGB, and neither will the pre-media team. That'll all be handled by a VIP that sits in the middle. And most importantly, we will be getting better colour control. The profiles throughout this will help that massively, and the quality of colour that we'll be getting on different devices will also look much better than they currently do. If you have any questions, I'm sure we'll be able to help you with those. Thanks very much.